The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
Welcome to another Leon Charney Report. We have a really eclectic and exciting show tonight.
I'm the Director of Policy at the American Council for World Jewry. That basically means that I put together the program and also I help design and shape the organization's policy. So today we were really trying, as we always do, to bring good people together to hear about a great idea. And that idea today was Taqeen, which is a joint Arab-Israeli and Arab-Jewish, I would say, incubator. And we brought people to hear about this great idea and how knowledge-based cooperation can really inspire so many people in Israel and abroad. We don't make money out of it, and that's not our purpose. We want to help promote good ideas, and if along the way they get investments out of it, then we're happy. We did our job, but that's what we're trying to achieve.
Well, one of the initiatives of the American Jewish Congress is something that we call science diplomacy. Science diplomacy is engaging countries and communities and people around the world in improving their dialogue amongst them. Science has no borders. Science has been, involved in improving the lives of many people, solving many of the crises around the world. We think it could be a useful tool in foreign policy as well, to create a better dialogue amongst nations, dialogue between Israel and the countries around the world, especially the developing countries, and also America and the countries around the world. We see the crisis that's enveloping the world today. And we think that science is one means to bridge the gap between the peoples.
Takwin is actually, and Ido said it very well about the startup nation, Takwin is about the startup region. It is not enough to have a great country, the startup nation being part of the region, but the whole region deserves a better future. And today the Middle East is the slowest growing area in the world. It is also most likely the most young region in the world. More than 60% of the people that live in the region are below the age of 30. The average age is 25. And the question is, how do you build another 70 million jobs in the Middle East by 2020? And what do you do when the Arab Spring is turning into what we see right now? The old distribution of the Middle East based on the Sykes-Picot Agreement has failed after 100 years, and something new needs to take place. One of the things that I believe in is that the future of the Middle East, the better future of the Middle East, lies within the ability to restart the region or to start up the region. I think last year we discovered that the internet market is really changing the whole world, but it's not only in English. We learned that today we have a great Chinese internet market, and actually I was recently introduced to the term BATX, which stands for Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and Xiaomi. Great for companies, internet companies in Chinese. And it doesn't stop there. There is an English-speaking internet market, there is a Chinese-speaking internet market, there is a Spanish internet market, there is a Russian one, there is a French one. But the fourth largest internet market, potentially, that can be created based on common language is the Arabic-speaking internet market. We're talking about a region with 22 countries, 350 million inhabitants, in addition 60 million expats living in different countries. And the idea is that Israel, while it is investing in entrepreneurs who are building companies in English, competing worldwide, it also has a fantastic society of Israeli Arabs, very talented, entrepreneurial, who can actually do something different, which is addressing the Middle East and help rebuild and reshape the Middle East with Arabic-speaking internet companies.
I am Imad Telhami, Arab Israeli from the minorities and within Israel, and I'm the chairman of Takwin Labs. Taqeen in Arabic means Genesis. So when we are talking about Genesis in the Bible, it means in the beginning. This is the creation of the beginning. So Taqeen, it means creation, and we created Taqeen to be incubator and fund to help Arab entrepreneurs in Israel. One of the issues that we can see in Israel that everyone know that Israel is very famous as a startup nation, and many startups in Israel is being successfully, and lately we hear more and more about it. The book of Startup Nation is a very famous book, and if you look at it, within Israel, Arabs are 20% of the country. So we are totally part of the nation. Are we part of the startup, the Israeli startup? And the answer is no. The answer, we are not there yet, and the idea is how to make the minorities and within Israel, especially today, that there are many young talent people, this is the new generation, that they are really growing up by looking and seeing what's happening in the country, and they want to be a real part of it. So we created Taqeen to help that young generation.
I'm Itzik Frid, and I'm the managing partner and CEO of Takwin Labs. Well, one day they just called me and said, how would you like to join Taqeen? And this goes back to the fundamental things that Taqeen is going to handle, because one of the things that I first asked them, I told them, guys, why would you hire a Jewish boy living in Tel Aviv, does not speak Arabic, and is not connected to the Arab world business-wise? And they told me, this is one of your first missions. You need to build the first generation of people that can fit the profile that we want in Taqeen. And that's when I joined them, because currently there's no infrastructure and no experience of entrepreneurship in high-tech in the Arab space. There's a lot of entrepreneurs in what's called the old economy and basic economy, but not in high-tech. And so the entrepreneurship spirit and the strength and the abilities exist there. The education exists, but there's no underlying layer of entrepreneurs that can start building the ecosystem. That's what we will do. The pieces are out there of the puzzle. The missing part of the puzzle is a successful entrepreneurship, as Imad mentioned earlier.
One of the initiatives is to start incubator hubs in developing parts of the world. Countries that don't have a high-tech community, have an education system capable of maybe creating opportunities for the young people. We're looking to do that in Africa, Latin America, and also in the Arab world. And I think it would bring the capability of a country like Israel in the technology arena to countries that have a need for these technologies. I think the best way to create a dialogue between people is to do something good for their communities, for their children. Any mother who finds that their child is in need of health care, would certainly make a friend for life with anybody who provided them with the medical care that afforded an opportunity to improve their lives and become healthy. Similarly in education. So we think that countries that have these capabilities, they include Israel, America, amongst some others, could create much more goodwill if they were to transfer that technology, nation to nation, not business to business, to other countries in the developing world. We are working with Takwin Labs from Israel. They were here today. They're an incubator hub in Israel that promotes basically the trying to create opportunities for Israeli Arabs and bring young entrepreneurs with a technology or scientific background in to assist them in promoting their ideas and getting them starting up new companies and new creative ideas.
For me, you have to remember, I'm a member of the first generation of Israelis who did not experience a big war. When you come to think about it, I was born in the beginning of the 80s, and we never experienced a big war. So for us, for my generation, it's all about hope. It's all about tomorrow, today, tomorrow. We're looking at the future in a very optimistic way, in a creative way, because the solutions that were brought to the table till this day were unsuccessful on many levels, did not bring us to the desirable peace. But in the level of the people, we communicate very well with many young adults from the Arab sector, and this is just another evidence of this kind of cooperation.
First of all, within the periphery in Israel, there is a high unemployment rate within generally Arabs and Jews. But if we look at Arabs, the unemployment rate is becoming higher, so we can say that 75% within the Arabs are employed, 25% not employed. If we look at the ladies, Arab ladies, we can say that 70% of the Arab ladies are not employed. And the main reason of Arab ladies are not employed because they live in the periphery. Unfortunately, there is not many companies, big companies, worked in the periphery. Arab lady, to be able to go to work or to find a job, must travel between 1 hour to 2 hours every day. It's difficult for them. It's not within who lives in the villages, will not find it easy. The good change that's happening lately within the Arabs, that you can see the amount of Arab ladies that goes to university and become a graduate, it's started to be higher than men. Looking 4 years ago, it was 60% for men, 40% for ladies. Before that was 70-30. Today it's changing. Today you can see that 60% are ladies, 40% are Arab men that goes to be graduate. And this has helped to find a different kind of jobs for academic ladies.
By the way, this is another reason to encourage high-tech entrepreneurship. Every tech job creates 5 additional jobs around it. So not necessarily all Arabs need to be high-tech entrepreneurs, but if there will be a good, strong core of Arab high-tech entrepreneurs, it will create employment all around them.
I was also very encouraged to read recently a very interesting interview with Queen Rania from Amman, who was talking exactly about the startup region that we're talking about. So we believe that people know who we are. They're willing to work with our companies. Most of our CEOs can travel around the region, which I cannot. Some of the companies that we're going to invest will not operate in the Middle East. There will be Arab entrepreneurs focusing on other markets. That is easier. I can tell you, for example, that in Al Bawara, one of our companies, which is called Documate, which created technology that you can use an iPhone, you can take pictures of buildings and actually get a 3-dimensional re-engineering of the building, so you can do renovation, for example. They do land measurements. Is operating in the US. It's a company that is generating very nice revenues. They even got funded by one of the top tier funds from the US, Battery Ventures. And we give it publicity, and it's very visible, and we hope it will be successful.
We have promoted this idea to some of the Gulf states. I think that they're all in agreement that this could be very useful for their citizens, And we think it would create a dialogue between people who, on the one hand, can provide the kinds of platforms that are needed to create jobs and opportunities in countries that need to create those kinds of jobs. So we're promoting this idea amongst Gulf states, promoting it in some of the surrounding countries, like Jordan, Egypt. We think it's just a means and a bridge to improve the relations amongst countries in the Middle East.
I can tell you in my personal side, I think the way that we do that and the way that we use the best technology in Israel and to bring that to the Arab young generation, it's already a great coexistence. It's already a great cooperation between Arabs and Jews. And I think that by doing that, this one will help really to find and the closing part of the gaps within Arab Israelis and Jewish within Israel. But at the end of the day, it will help the country to grow their economy, because when Arabs is improving and the economy will be improved, the whole economy for the country will improve in Israel. On top of that, we can see ourselves as a real big bridge through the technology to grow and expand our technology to the Middle East. And we can be a real bridge in between the technology in Israel and in between the need within the Middle East, that we can be a real bridge by knowing the language, knowing the culture, and being able to adapt and get the best out of what we have, to use it all over the Arab countries.
Okay, I think that we can also look at Taqeen as a way to empower weaker parts of the Israeli society. By the way, another aspect that we see in Taqeen, first of all, the good side from the Arab side, that there's a lot of will and a lot of energies and a lot of things starting.
So we created Taqeen to help that young generation to invent themselves, to come with their own ideas, to help them to grow the idea, to help them to put money, of course, with them, and to give them the best mentorship. My dream is actually to help between 50 to 60 young people in Taqeen within the next 4 to 5 years, and at least to achieve 3 to 4 big success stories, and to make some real exits, and that we can say that here we are part of this startup nation. Because otherwise, if we don't do that, we will never be able to break the glass ceiling that we have above us. Success stories usually help to let others dream, and this is where I'm really looking to help as I can do to let young Arabs be themselves and to show their real quality and potential to succeed in that field as well.
I think that some people would say that the economic peace, the whole idea of economic peace, would eventually prevent people from actually making peace because they already have the economic cooperation. But I think that that would not happen, actually, because people would want more of that good thing that is happening. So I think that it starts with economic cooperation on the ground, and once there's peace, sky's the limit. But I think that success on the ground, and this is what we are trying to promote and help with, success on the ground is the ultimate proof that the BDS movement it's going to fail, because it does not represent a major public. It's just a very minor, very marginal phenomenon, and I think that this is one of the ways to show that they're wrong.
You know, I call this a disruptive moment. It takes great disruptive moments to alter big problems and make big structural changes. You know, it took the Great Depression to basically change our sort of social platforms in America, Social Security and welfare and other reforms. It took 2007 and the economic collapse in America to change the banking system forever in America. We have that kind of disruptive moment today in the Middle East. You have ISIS, you have Iran, marching forward towards nuclear capability. You've got wars and civil wars throughout the areas. Every part of the leadership in the Middle East today is worried about retaining their positions, retaining control. They're worried about their relations with America because of what's going on. And the result of that, I think, is that it affords a real opportunity to make the kind of changes that are often difficult to make in climates where they're more comfortable. And I think this is the time. Timing is everything sometimes in solving a political crisis. You have everyone afraid of something. And the Israelis obviously have, problems with the countries on their border and the terrorists on their border. The ISIS is making a big impact, of course, in the Gulf region and other countries. Iran is going to get nuclear capability potentially. Everyone needs to solve this crisis, and I think the opportunity is ripe to get people to talk together, work together on all these fronts. My sense in traveling through this region is that people are ready to openly talk about it. I don't think anyone ever disagree that there shouldn't be a way to make peace, but I think they're prepared now to be a little bit more opportunistic in trying to engage the parties, throughout the world to create a moment where maybe we can have a better dialogue, and a better dialogue may lead to, the beginning of a process towards a more peaceful region.
Welcome to another Leon Charney Report. We're proud to have Graham Allison on with us once more. If you remember, during the summer, during the Democratic Convention, I did a 2-hour special for Graham because he had written a brand new book called Nuclear Terrorism, the Ultimate Preventable Catastrophe. And Graham Allison, if you don't know who he is, you probably do by now, is the founding dean of the John F. Kennedy School of Public Policy and now the director of the Belfer
Center for Science
at Harvard University. The experts on nuclear terrorism in the world, and it is a problem, that's for sure. The last time we spoke, it was at the Democratic Convention, and there was a lot of buzz around it. You might get into the government, Graham, and you said to me, I remember, well, I've been on both sides. I think you work with Reagan and the Democrats. Is that correct?
Yes.
So the night that the election was held, did you have any preference on that night?
Well, I did. I think that Kerry clearly became engaged in the issue of nuclear terrorism. He gave I thought, a terrific speech on it. I talked to him about it a number of times, and you can tell if somebody really feels it. President Bush has said the right words, but I haven't seen him doing the things that you would think that he should be doing if he really believed this is the single most serious threat to American national security. I'm hoping, though, that the second term, putting together a new team, an excellent team of people. So let's hope for the second term.
Are you satisfied with Rumsfeld as Secretary of Defense?
I'm not. I know Don Rumsfeld. I've worked with him on other occasions. I would think that they should have a new team altogether. It would be my bet.
Fresh energy, new
Yes.
energy. What about Condoleezza Rice? I know you know her.
I'm a big fan of Condi Rice. I think she's going to be an outstanding Secretary of State. I think she's putting together an excellent team of people. Zellick, the number 2, was a student of mine a long time ago.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Bob
He's
Zellick?
terrific. Yeah, absolutely terrific. He was the special trade representative. And she's, I think, going to assemble a terrific team. I think she'll be more successful than Colin Powell. And Colin Powell is one of my heroes and a person I worked with in the Reagan administration. So I'm a big fan of Colin. But I think whereas in the case of Powell, Bush never felt comfortable that he was really part of the team. So when Powell would explain that this is the wrong way to accomplish something, some of the people, at least maybe Bush, but certainly the staffers, were thinking, well, he doesn't really want to go there. Whereas with respect to Condi, she's got such a tight relationship with President Bush that I think he will be comfortable that she's trying to find the best way to accomplish an objective, not arguing about the objective.
And she'll also, the foreign leaders will know she's carrying Bush's message.
Right.
So you don't have this dichotomy, because Powell really, you know, he had his own feelings, own ideas, although he worked for the administration. I mean, you worked in administrations, I worked with President Carter.
Sure.
And, you know, you have to have this sense of loyalty, and Powell was so individualistic and yet conforming. Look, the dramatic part of Powell's tenure was when he swore to the UN that they were weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
I'm sure you remember that.
Vividly.
And he's an honorable man.
Absolutely.
And you're a scholar. How did that happen?
Well, I think he'll undoubtedly write about it in his book, but I think that my interpretation, I have no evidence, and I've not talked to anybody about it, but my sense is that he understood that the president had decided that he was moving to war, and that the job of his Secretary of State, if he's going to stay part of the team, he can always leave, but if he's going to stay part of the team, is to make the best case that he can. He then, as he said in his speech, went out to CIA and spent 2 or 3 days looking at the evidence. As in fact, it turns out, the CIA evidence said that there were chemical and biological weapons, and everybody believed that. I believed that, on the basis of what they had said. Even as a sophisticated a consumer of intelligence as Secretary Powell evidently bought into the case, and then he made the argument. But it turned out that it included a number of things that were just not true.
Do you attack some of these problems at Harvard, at the School of Government? Do you get into depth and you study these problems?
We do. In fact, in the case of the nuclear terrorism book, I mentioned to you, I just was testifying the day in Washington to the President's Commission on Weapons of Mass Destruction, and they're looking in particular at the intelligence requirements for preventing nuclear terrorism, the subject of my book.
Who runs that commission?
The commission is co-chaired by Chuck Robb, the former senator from Virginia, and Lawrence Silberman, the judge.
So that's an executive commission under Bush?
Under Bush,
it's not
yeah.
Congressional?
No.
So this is Bush trying to get a committee together to say, hey, how do we really curb this thing?
How do we look at this issue? But they're looking in particular, just as you said, about the intelligence side.
Well, that's key, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I said to him, I think that if we're really going to be serious about a strategy for preventing nuclear terrorism, and do something like my proposed 3 no's: no loose nukes, no new nascent nukes, no new nuclear weapon states, we require an intelligence agency that can tell the difference between what's happening in Iraq, the answer nothing, but they told us something was happening, and what's happening in North Korea, where I believe something very dangerous is happening now, but where we seem to have less intelligence than we need. So we need a real rebuilding of the intelligence community, as the 9/11 Commission concluded. So we were talking about the details of that.
But why did it fall apart so badly, Graham?
I don't know. I think that that's one of the subjects that they ask about, and I offered a few speculations, and I presume their report will have more to say. I mean, we had an intelligence community that almost emerged by accident in World War II, the Office of Strategic Studies. It attracted an extraordinary group of people. So Bill Langer, a famous historian at Harvard, the guys from Yale like Sherman Kent. So there was a first generation of really remarkable people, because it was the wartime, and everybody would go do everything that was possible to do. There then was a period in which you can argue, well, should they have participated in the overthrow of the Shah of Iran? Well, now President Clinton and Secretary Albright have said that was a terrible mistake. But if you look and see what was going on with the alternative, maybe at the time, I don't know, hindsight, clarifies a lot of things. So in any case, you then had the abuses, including some gross abuses that were washed in public in the church committee hearings back in the back in the 70s. Right. And then you started putting more and more restrictions on the intelligence community and its behavior, and more lawyers saying, well, is this possible, this. So I think that the place has become kind of afraid of making mistakes. And it's true that if you have a serious intelligence community that are out trying to compromise people in such a way that they commit treason against their own country, these are probably not very nice people, okay?
Probably.
So, and it probably requires doing things that us wouldn't like to know too much about because it sort of seems ugly or unpleasant. But if you say a lot of business is done in the back alleys of the world or undercover, you need people who are prepared to do that. And I think we've let that atrophy.
At your center at Harvard, the Belfer Center, is the priority studying nuclear terrorism now, or you do many other things?
We do many subjects, but I would say that the core subject that from the beginning has been the national security of the United States and international security. And I think that President Bush said rightly in the first presidential debate, what's the single most serious threat to American national security? It's terrorists bringing something like a nuclear bomb to New York or Washington or Boston or San Francisco and blowing it up. You try to imagine what life will be like if, God forbid, such a thing happens for even the people that are in other cities. That'll be an America-altering event. I mean, it's contrary to our whole idea of a free society and open society. So I think we need to be motivated to say, everything that's technically feasible to do to prevent this, we should do on the fastest possible timetable.
Well, we did your show, the 2-hour special, which is very unusual for us. We don't do 2-hour specials.
I'm aware, and I was very grateful, and I got many nice comments on the show.
Well, thank you, but we really did it because I felt that this is one of the, maybe the worst problem facing the world, because you blow yourself up. The thing that people commented to me about was, is it really preventable? And this is what they couldn't believe, because it's so frightening to people to think about it. And you talk to younger people who have young kids, and I tell them, look, you can have poverty, you can have all kinds of tsuras, as we say in French, which is not good things. But nuclear terrorism explodes the world, and no one seems to be able to buy into the fact that it's preventable. And I think your book is sort of a lone ranger out there trying to talk about this. And we went through it the last time. And your basic premise was inspection.
Well, there's in the case, I would say, in the case of bioterrorism, is it possible to prevent every future bioterrorist attack on the U.S.? No, not possible. But in the case of nuclear terrorism, there's a strategic narrow to the problem, a choke point, that if we were able to choke it tightly enough on the supply side, that we can essentially reduce to nearly zero the likelihood of a terrorist nuclear bomb. Because the only way a terrorist bomb can go off in New York is if terrorists either get a bomb or get the highly enriched uranium or plutonium from which you could make a bomb. Now, highly enriched uranium and plutonium are both too hard for terrorists to make. They're created products, but they require multi-billion-dollar investments. So only states can do that. So what I try to do in the book is outline a strategy for choking the supply side, in which you have no loose nukes. That means you go lock down every weapon and all the material, just as good as we locked down gold in Fort Knox, or as Russia.
But who does that? The United States or the UN?
I'd say the U.S. takes a lead with Russia, Bush and Putin, and I'm hoping that when Bush goes to meet with Putin February 24th, they're going to have their summit at Bratislava. Bush ought to make sure Putin feels in his own gut that if a nuclear weapon comes loose in Russia and Chechens get it, they're not going to come blow up New York, they're going to go blow up Moscow. So he should be feeling not that he's doing us a favor by locking up something, but he should feel like he's doing himself a favor and his people a favor. So my proposal is that Bush and Putin agree we're each going to guarantee to each other that we're going to lock it up. Nuclear weapons in Russia are going to be locked up as tight as the treasures in the Kremlin armory. I mean, who cares about, these are very valuable things, gold and an icon and objects of art, but should they be secured better than nuclear weapons that could blow us up? No, absolutely not. So I would say they should agree they're going to do that themselves, and then they go around and sign up one by one the leaders of other states that have nuclear weapons or materials from which you can make bombs. So they have to go to Mr. Hu in China and say, you know, if a nuclear weapon comes loose in China, maybe one of these separatist groups that you worry about would get it. So there's a bedrock of common interest here that I think they could build on, but it takes some leadership, and I think that's what President Bush should do.
All right, we're going to take a break, Graham. We'll come right back. I'm going to ask Graham about Iran. Do they have nuclear weapons? I've been in Israel since I visited with Graham, and we know what the Israelis are thinking. I talked to a lot of ex-Mossad guys and active Mossad guys, and they say that it's the United States' problem. That's what they say technically in the forefront, but behind the scenes they probably got a plan if they need to do it. And what do we do in North Korea and some of these other states that are popping up? So stay tuned, we'll be right back. We're back. We're talking with Graham Allison, who really needs no introduction, but in case you've been watching other things, he is the founding dean of the Kennedy School of Government, probably the most prestigious school of its type in the world. Maybe Princeton would argue that, I think, right, Graham? And now he's the director of the Belfer Center, which is really involved with national security, international security. Do you have colleagues in Russia that you talk to?
We do, actually. I'm going back to Boston tonight because Yeltsin's former national security advisor, Andrei Kokoshin, who's now one of the major Putin people in the Duma, is going to be visiting me in Boston tomorrow.
Oh, that's nice. So are you going to tell him what you...
Andrei and I are friends for a number of years, and he took my book and wrote a review of it for the Russian Foreign Ministry in their internal journal, and then he's even made a small monograph out of it in which he points out that this is a serious threat to Russia, not just to the US, and that Russia needs to be as concerned about nuclear weapons in Pakistan, let's say, that might come loose, or nuclear material from which you could make a bomb in Uzbekistan or Belarus, as we are. So I think he's been quite a good voice in the Russian scene. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of voices. It hasn't gripped Russians the way that it has.
Do they have
Americans.
an intellectual counterpart university, something like a Harvard over there, the University of Moscow?
Well, MGU, the Moscow State University, is the top of their line, but because, well, first, you know, they had all these horrible years of communism, and then more recently with a bit of convulsion, they're still, you know, a little shaky. But they have serious universities, and they've always had great math and science and, you know, engineering.
But in public policy and
in public policy
rough,
government,
you know, especially the
much
communists,
less, yeah.
Not
Yeah.
much public
I mean, you don't
policy.
want to have training people in,
How about
in
Gorbachev?
communism.
Have you met with him?
I have, yes.
How do you paint this guy? Interesting guy.
He's a
isn't he?
very interesting guy, and we had him visit Harvard on a couple of occasions, and I've seen him over in Russia. I think he certainly surprised the hell out of his communist colleagues because, I mean, how did he ever become the leader of the Soviet Union? I mean, that was the most remarkable fact, and I think the people who picked him never imagined that he would have been the person that he was. I think that it's a mixture of things. I mean, I applaud him for ending the Cold War with a whimper rather than a bang. I mean, I lived through the old Cold War period in which, as you did, you know, I could quite well imagine we were going to have a general nuclear war in which all Americans would have gotten killed. And the fact that a country that hadn't been disarmed, I mean, they still had all of their nuclear weapons with which they could have destroyed us, they still do today, but that they basically, you know, put up the white flag in the Cold War. It's a kind of an amazing accomplishment. And Yeltsin actually had a good line about that. He said, you know, it's not fair. You shouldn't say you won the Cold War. You should say we won the Cold War because we became free too. And so I think what happened was a combination of strength on the part of the US from which the Soviets could never, by virtue of their own effort, overwhelm us, and then the hollowing out of their ideology, so that by the end you didn't have too many believers in a system that didn't make any sense to start with.
You have many Russian scholars, and you have many graduate fellows who study Russian history and public policy, I'm sure. How did Putin become president of Russia? How did this happen? This was like a lonely guy. He was a KGB guy doing something. Was there a deal there with Yeltsin? What happened over there?
Yeltsin,
It's a fascinating story.
It is, and it'll be, many books to be written on this, many theses. Basically, Yeltsin, I think, is another extraordinary figure. I mean, very flawed, very complicated.
He loves tennis. I represent a guy named Merit Safin who just won the Australian title.
Indeed, I saw him on the tube.
Right.
Yeah.
So he told me that when he walks in Moscow, he's always hanging around. Yeltsin loves tennis. That I can tell you is for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But basically, Yeltsin, realizing his own health and his own circumstances, in case he'd come to the end of his career, wanted to have a successor who would be a modernizer, but who would also be tough enough to govern. So he went through 3 prime ministers in a row. None of them lasted more than about 6 or 8 months. He had Primakov, then he had Koryenko, then he had another one. So he kept, taking one, and the guy's not doing it. Take another one, take another one. How he came to pick Putin, and whether he had any idea how he was going to turn out, I guess he tried him as prime minister, and then Yeltsin became sick again, and he was there, and he seemed to be managing.
Well, it seemed that he also got a blanket pardon. Yeltsin at that time was involved with who knows what. And, there must have been a deal where Putin said, all right, I'm not going to touch you, and I become president of...
right.
But one of your scholars was right about this.
The other guys would have given him a pardon too. So the question is,
why pick
what
you?
did he see?
Maybe believed him more. It's called credibility. All right, Iran. It's a headache. Do they have nuclear weapons?
Again, nobody knows as far as I know, but I think that, are they seriously seeking nuclear weapons? I would say absolutely. Are they making progress? Yes, a lot. How far are they from completing their facilities that will enrich uranium, which will be the basis on which they'll make a bomb, or ultimately then reprocess plutonium? I would say, in fact, in Israel, I was there, as I mentioned, in January, talking to people, comparing notes. Some people say, 24 months, some people say 18 months, some people say 36 months, but it's not forever. It's a short
Do you have any
period,
doubts?
and it might be faster.
Graham, after talking to the Israelis, and do you have any doubts that if Israel really thought they got nuclear weapons, they'd do a preemptive attack?
Well, I think there's no question that they've looked at that issue
this
carefully.
I can tell you, yes.
Yes. And whether in the end, and undoubtedly if you were in charge of the Israeli military, you would have created some plans, but whether somebody decides to pull the trigger, that's another question.
That's Sharon with Bush. You can never do that alone. But Begin did do it in 81.
Yes, he did with Ozark.
And he didn't do it in conjunction with Ronald Reagan. He did it on his own.
Well, there was a little bit of coordination, I think.
You think
but
so?
It was my impression. I don't know for sure, but my impression is that
I think he probably told them. I don't know if he asked them. That's a big difference.
I'm sure he didn't ask, and I don't think Sharon would ask Bush.
No.
No, I mean, if he decides that Israel's national security requires an action to be taken, he might inform, he might even seek some assistance. I'm sure he would, but I don't think he would ask.
All right, North Korea.
But on Iran, if I say another word, if I could.
Sure.
Iran, I believe, is absolutely a doable deal in diplomatic terms if our objective were simply the nuclear weapons, and I believe that's what it should be. Not that there's not 100 other issues with Iran, but none of them get better if Iran gets nuclear weapons, and most all of them get worse. So I would say there's a deal sort of that's ripe right now, but it would require the U.S.
We don't have
stepping
diplomatic relationship now with Iran,
and we don't have a policy towards Iran. So I mean, we've just been letting it fester. We make some noises about them from time to time, but that's about it. But you now have the Europeans with the EU3 have negotiated a temporary, voluntary suspension of the work on this enrichment facility.
You believe it?
I do, but I believe it's going to break down unless somebody enters the scene. So I think we need to take some carrots as well as a stick. The stick needs to be a credible military threat to destroy those factories before they become operational.
All right, but why do you
the
think
carrots need to be enough that they can get something, and then we need to have a freeze, and I would say something like a multi-year. I like Al Baradei's 5-year moratorium. That's verifiable, so you got enough inspectors and an inspection regime to tell, and then we just have a little breathing space for working on the more fundamental problems.
But why is Bush not backing that? Tell me.
I hope that as they think about their priorities for the second term, they will. Previously, they've said, one, we don't want to deal with Iran. Not at all. We don't want to engage with Iran.
All right, but your friend Condi Rice, couldn't she change that policy?
She could, and I would wish and hope she does. But I think what they'll do is the Bush administration undoubtedly is doing its own strategic reassessment of its priorities for the second term, with the president and the vice president, in the center of that. Iraq is a huge headache, but at least they've got, some idea of what they're doing. But with respect to Iran and North Korea, my own analysis of what happened in the first term was that they basically didn't have a very active policy.
They ignored it?
Yeah. In fact, I have a friend, and he said, in Washington, I saw a few weeks ago, and he said, the joke among the new neocon joke is, what is American policy towards North Korea? He said, it's easy. It's the same as our policy towards Iran.
Who is running the foreign policy? Is it the neocons? Is it Cheney and Powell was a pretty open guy. I'm confused a little bit. Who runs that policy?
I think on some issues there were sharp divisions, and therefore the policy sort of went this way a little bit and that way a little bit, and there was never kind of a coherent policy.
A lot of your neocons are from Harvard too, aren't they?
Yes, some are, absolutely.
And then they don't come back to get some
some
refresher courses there?
Well, fortunately there's a range of opinion even at Harvard, and so people have sometimes sharply different
You're
views.
managing to me. Well, running out of time. Tell me, Henry Kissinger, he's a friend of yours, I assume.
Yes, he was my teacher. And
is he on board on this nuclear problem? Does he talk about it much?
He does. I've talked to him about him several times, and I would say he's got his head screwed on this one, yes.
Well, he'd be a good one to talk about it also.
He'd be an excellent one. Actually, you should have him on your show.
All right, we'll invite him on. Henry, you come on next. I don't know if you can match Graham, but we'll bring him on. One thing about you, you're in such a tough area, in a lugubrious place, and you're always jovial. How do you do it?
I think my mother and father gave me good chemistry.
You're Scottish, or where are you from originally?
I think they're some version of Scotch or Scotch-Irish, yeah.
It's wonderful to talk to you. It's a tough subject, but you remain basically optimistic. And as I said before, you don't look lugubrious at all. We are. We're very upset because we want Bush and team to consider some priority problem. You know why? Because I want to save my kids and his kids and grandkids and your kids. We'll see you next week, and we hope this really penetrates your consciousness.